before I talk about these 4 very important muscles to chewing, these are the reasons you can, chew. I want to talk about the jaw joint, which leads me to the temporal bone, which leads me to this question. What are the 5 features of the temporal bone? Who can tell me that? Miss Rader, please.
They are the external auditory meatus, the mastoid process, the zygomatic process, the styloid process, and the temporomandibular joint.
That was well said. Thank you. 3 processes, an ear hole, and a jaw joint, right? Really nicely done. Mr. Singletary, is that what you were going to say? Mr. Singletary, unmute. Unmute, sir. Well, thank you. Is that what you were going to say, sir?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, hit the wrong button.
Good. But anyway, that's what you were going to say, right?
Yes, and I had another question.
Well, hold on, Mr. Singletary. Before your question, one second.
Sorry.
Go ahead and say it then.
One of the areas you're probably going to get to, and I don't know how to pronounce it. It's spelled Pterygoids.
It looks like it's spelled Pterygoids, but it's just pterygoids. The P is silent.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Mr. Singletary, though, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
Oh, the same ones? Okay. Zygomatic process, the styloid process, the mastoid process, the internal auditory meatus.
Yeah. External auditory.
External auditory meatus.
Yep.
And then it's temporal mandibular joint.
Good. That's why I had you say it. So they're all hard to say. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Craven, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
The external auditory meatus, the mastoid process, the styloid process, the zygomatic process, and the temporal mandibular joint.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Mr. Bose, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
You have the external auditory meatus, the mastoid process. It's TMJ, but I'm trying to learn how to pronounce that. Hold on.
Temporal
mandibular joint.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Temporal mandibular joint, and then zygomatic process, and your styloid process.
Yep. Did you say the ear thing?
Isn't that the external auditory?
Yeah, it is. I hear it so much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
It's not you, it's me. Like, I forget, like, there's 5 things. And
No.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Suriel.
Yes, Mr. Topcup?
Ms. Suriel, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
Oh my God, Mr. Topcup, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want some help?
Please, I'm just in the hospital right now. I'm leaving home, but that's why
Okay.
I'm like, okay. But yeah, if you help me, I will.
Good.
Thank you so much.
That's my job. All right, you got a bump back here that's called the mastoid process.
Okay. The mastoid process?
Yes. You've got something deep inside your little toothpick thing called the styloid process.
The styloid process?
Yep, you'll never see it, but anyway. You've got part of your cheekbone is part of the temporal bone. It's called the zygomatic process.
Zygomatic process?
Then you've got your ear hole, which is called your external auditory meatus.
External auditory meatus.
That was beautiful, by the way. And then you've got your jaw joint, which is your temporal bone and your jawbone come together, and that's your temporal mandibular joint.
Temporal mandibular joint.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Tapscott. Thank you.
Miss Osuna.
Yes.
Madam, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
There is the temporomandibular joint, the zygomatic process, styloid process, mastoid process, and the external auditory meatus.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Ma,
Yes, sir.
if you need help saying these words too, I'm happy to help you, but what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
No, I'll just get through it. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I know mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic arch, right?
Yeah, zygomatic arch, by the way, everybody, is because the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic process from the temporal bone come together and make an arch. So the zygomatic arch is 2 bones. It's the zygomatic and this feature coming off the temporal bone called the zygomatic process. They meet and make your cheekbone. So zygomatic process, sir, process.
Oh, zygomatic process.
Yes.
Process.
Yes.
Another one, some external something.
Yeah, external
External
auditory.
auditory
It means to hear. Meatus.
meatus.
Yeah, that's hard. Anyway, good. External auditory meatus. And then what's the jaw joint called?
Mandible.
Mandible meets your temporal bone, so we call it your temporal mandibular joint.
Temporal mandibular joint.
Nice job, sir. Good job. Really. These are hard words. Yeah? Miss Mates. Hold on, I got it. Somehow Mr. Godot accidentally unmuted himself. Okay. Miss Mates, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
The 5 features are the external auditory meatus, temporal mandibular joint, that's the jaw, the styloid process, the mastoid process, and the zygomatic process.
Bam.
And that's the 2 bones joined together, the temporal mandibular and the zygomatic process.
I'm so sorry, what'd you say?
The 2 bones that are combined together, temporal mandibular and the zygomatic, that make the arch.
The zygomatic bone and the zygomatic process come together to make the arch. Yeah, right up here. Good job, man. Good at massage, and she knows her anatomy. Bam. Yeah, like it. All right, everybody. So today we are going to talk about the temporal mandibular joint and how you chew. And most of us think that we just chew like this. But actually, in many ways, your jaw comes down and out and back in. Down and out and back in. So it's got some movement frontwards and backwards, which is why I'm sure everybody here has locked open their jaw at some point just for a brief second, like where you had it, you're like it feels stuck or whatever. That's because in a way it comes out of joint a little bit when you chew. And so if there's tension in this area, by the way, I hope we can all see how that could create all sorts of symptoms. So people with temporal mandibular joint syndrome, who have problems in this area, complain of pain in their jaw. They absolutely do. But they also complain of headaches, dizziness, because it can affect their inner ear, eyesight problems, because it actually puts enough pressure in here to kind of affect eye focus. Have any of you had a massage so good that you saw better after you got up off the table? Because I have. From you guys. I've actually had some of you in class work on me where I get up and I'm like, I can see better. Because you release tension from around my head. I'm not kidding. So anyway, you can get all sorts of other symptoms from pressure around this area. Okay? So let me share my screen with you and we'll talk about the 4 chewing muscles. Which aren't just important for chewing. They are important for the fact that they can also create great deals of stress, because your jaw is most definitely associated with a lot of emotional things, right? We often have to clench our jaw. You can't really tell Tapscott what you're thinking all the time, right? So you clamp it down. Okay. So let's look at this picture, by the way. This picture This is the temporal bone back here. And I want to make something really clear. This bone right here is your zygomatic bone. This bone here that connects to it is actually your temporal bone. This is the zygomatic process of your temporal bone. It meets here to create the zygomatic arch. The zygomatic arch is the temporal bone meeting the zygomatic bone. And it creates your cheekbone, zygomatic arch. We're going to learn today about the temporalis muscle that actually goes underneath this arch and actually attaches to your jaw. We're also going to learn about the masseter that is not shown in this picture that actually attaches to the zygomatic arch here and goes down and attaches to the bottom of your jaw here. It runs right here. You can't see it in this picture. And we're going to learn about two muscles that fit right in here that are not shown in here called the pterygoids that have a lot to do with tension in this joint. And they're found, the lateral one is found right underneath the cheekbones. This is why when you're rubbing somebody's jaw, it's important to find their cheekbones, press on them reasonably hard, fall off them, and then press really hard. You should be able to go in somebody's masseter, and we're going to find out there's a pterygoid under there too, pretty hard, and press down slowly. It's very effective, by the way. You can go really slow and really hard. So the minute you fall off that cheekbone, go really hard, because there's some really important stuff right in here, right below that bone. Yes, Miss Savarino?
You were just out of frame when you were doing that.
Oh, yeah? Is this better?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. I guess that would really help since we're on video. All right. So you've got a cheekbone right here, and I will put my thumb right on the cheekbone. I'm not trying to rub the cheekbone, but I'm on it because the minute I fall off it, I'm popping over it right now. The minute I fall off it, I go in deep and then start heading down towards the bottom of the jaw. Because I want to hit the masseter, but I also want to hit the lateral pterygoid, and we're later going to find out it's right underneath the cheekbone, right here. So let's look at these in detail. Yeah. And by the way, look at the SCM. The SCM also attaches to the temporal bone. Lots of stuff attaches to the temporal bone. The sternocleidomastoid attaches to the mastoid process temporal bone. The temporalis is partially attached to the temporal bone. The masseter that we're going to learn about is partially attached to part of the temporal bone. Temporal bone is kind of important. Okay, so let's look at this. Now, come on back to me. There we go. Here's the temporal muscle. It disappears underneath this zygomatic arch. You can see how the zygomatic arch is actually formed by this bone, meeting the feature of the temporal bone here. The temporalis goes underneath here and hooks to the jaw. Here's the masseter. The masseter actually attaches in here to the zygomatic arch and goes down and essentially hooks to the bottom of your jaw, all the way down to the bottom, right there. Boom. Very cool. Okay. Let's move right along. We're not doing that yet. Okay. Okay, let's look at the masseter. Masseter is actually a two-bellied muscle. Some people argue it's a three-bellied muscle, but it's a whole other discussion. But it doesn't matter. The muscle is found right here, right? You don't have to worry about the superficial belly and the deep belly. The fact is, as far as you're concerned, this thing has an origin of the zygomatic arch, and it attaches to the angle of the ramus of the mandible. Anybody remember what ramus means? Miss Hendrickson?
I think it's like an arm.
It is. So they're saying there's an arm on this mandible, and where that arm comes in and hooks to the mandible, there's an angle, and so it hooks down here. But even that doesn't matter because you can feel it going down. So when we're and by the way, the masseter's job is to what? Elevate my mandible. What does that mean? Let me show you. Close my mouth. That's what it means. It pulls my jaw up. A lot of people consider it to be the strongest muscle in the body. pound for pound. That's a little hard to prove or disprove, but you can bite with enough force to bite a finger off. Some people say 300 pounds of force. I don't know if that's quite true, but it's very powerful. And the thing I want you to really remember is if you're trying to rub the Masseter, again, you start on the zygomatic arch, you fall off and immediately plunge in. And it is a very thick, very strong muscle. If you're using flat thumbs or something flat, you should be able to, I mean, I'm going to push really hard on mine. It makes my eyes want to water, but I can do it. Like, it's very intense, but I wouldn't quite call it painful in the traditional sense. So play with your masseters to kind of get used to them. Very stress relieving. So anyway, it's your chewing muscle. It's your main chewing muscle. It's your strongest chewing muscle. It hooks from your cheekbones, your zygomatic arch, to your mandible, really, right? And the zygomatic arch is formed with the zygomatic process of the temporal bone and the zygomatic, making the zygomatic arch. And that's where it hooks to. Zygomatic arch, your cheekbone to your jawbone. And this is right here. This is your masseter. It's your main chewing muscle. We care about it as a stress-related muscle too. Some people grind their teeth in their sleep. Some people clench their jaws during the day. When we get stressed, it's one of the things we do. When we get angry, you're like, oh, right? This is not unusual at all. By the way, it doesn't just have to be rubbed down too. I'm seeing some people do some creative things. You can kind of catch it in back here, in front here, and pull to the back and kind of cross-section across it. You can do all sorts of stuff. Just be worried about irritating the facial skin, but the muscle's fine. So that's the masseter. Super important if you're trying to work on people with temporal mandibular joint syndrome. And probably something you might want to do in all your massage, period. This is just a nice diagram of the origin insertion. The origin is mainly on the zygomatic bone, but it's on the whole zygomatic arch. And then it inserts down in here into all this jaw. So really, it really glues onto the jawbone in a really strong way. Right in here. Very powerful. Kind of going back diagonal slightly. Okay. Then the temporalis muscle. The temporalis muscle, its origin, this gray spot here, is actually in something called the temporal fossa. And they also write in your book temporal fascia. And that's because you remember the Gallia aponeurotica above here? The shower cap on your head? The temporal fascia actually attaches to that. So this shower cap goes down over here too. And look at how many bones get touched by this muscle. What's this bone in front called of your head? Miss Carrillo?
Frontal?
Yes, the frontal. And what's this bone on the side here called? Mr. Singletary, what's the bone on the side here called? Nope. Okay. Miss Rader, what's this bone on the side here called?
The parietal.
Yes. So we've got the frontal, the parietal. Yep. And Mr. Sears, what's this bone down here called? Mr. Singletary, sorry. Oh, I thought your hand was up. Now it's not up? Okay. All right. Can somebody tell me what this bone down here is called? Mr. Ma.
Is that temporal?
That is the temporal bone, sir. Yep. And here's the tricky one, everybody. What's this bone in here? Miss Rader.
Sorry, the sphenoid bone.
The sphenoid bone. Guys, that's the one that goes through your whole head. And I said where we think of our temples being is really where our sphenoid bone is. Do you see that? Kind of behind the eye sockets there? So, if there's tension in the temporalis and it's attached to all the fascia of your head and it's attached to the parietal bone and the frontal bone and the sphenoid bone and the temporal bone and inserts into the coronoid process of your jaw, but but let's just say your jaw. Could we see that could cause some problems? Yeah. The other thing, thank you. The other thing is, look, it's in back here, and it kind of reaches forward. So it does help too. Remember, it runs diagonal. And if something runs diagonal, it's going to help do two things. One is it's going to help lift my jaw, elevate. But it's also going to help pull it back to retract it. Now that's a good thing. I want to pull my jaw back in place. But if it's really tight, it takes that nice temporal mandibular joint and makes it tighter. Because it's pulling it into your temporal mandibular joint. So when you see people rubbing their head like this, that's a good thing. Because they are loosening this muscle up, and this muscle can make their jaw too tight. It's actually a retraction muscle. It pulls it into that socket even more. And that's a problem. Yeah? So that's the temporalis. So now we should all be rubbing this whole area, really kind of above the ears, and this whole big area, about this big around here. That's your temporalis. Then we should get on the jaw, the cheek, the zygomatic arch, your cheekbones, and skip right down here and hit the masseter. So we've got all this and the masseter. You probably should hit that on almost every client. Those are pretty important areas to hit. Now you will have clients that say I have makeup on, I don't want you to touch my hair, that's fine. No, but I'm gonna mute Mr. Law. There we go. Okay. You just weren't muted, sir. I didn't want you to say something embarrassing. I'm always thinking that's going to happen in some class. With me, probably. Miss Carrillo, talk to me.
Coronoid is shaped like the beak of a crow. I remember coracoid is like beak-like shape, and then coronoid sounded like that, so I wondered what it was like.
The beak of a crow, I like it. It is, yeah, the beak part of your jaw. And you guys won't see it, right? It's covered over by the masseter. But it doesn't matter because really you've got access to 95% of that muscle. And by the way, the zygomatic arch is big enough that you could poke a finger through if you were dead and there was no muscle in there. But the temporalis is filling in this spot, which is why we can't reach underneath our cheekbones. There's stuff packed in there, mostly the temporalis. Okay, so we've got the masseter on the bottom of the cheekbones, the temporalis on the top of the cheekbones. Yeah? And we've decided this stuff's pretty darn important because now all these bones in the skull and all this fascia is getting, messed with here. Oh, this is good. Cool. All right. Now let's talk about medial and lateral pterygoids. You probably will not massage medial pterygoids. The medial pterygoid elevates and protracts the jaw, and it's actually inside your mouth. It's actually inside your mouth. You can put on rubber gloves and with a client's permission go inside their mouth. I've had it done to me before. It makes you cough, yes. And it's very invasive and stuff. Make sure you have permission. But you could do it. I just don't find there's a lot of reason for it. It actually protracts and helps pull the jaw out. And so I don't find that it's one of the problems with TMJ, luckily. But you can go inside. I wonder if they have an origin picture, because it's really hard to picture the origin. 1 second, let's see. No, they don't. Well, I mean, they do, but it's really hard to tell from this picture. But basically, it hooks up deep inside the top of your mouth, and it's actually hooked to the sphenoid bone running through your head, right? It's up in there, up in your maxilla, up in there. And then it goes down. It's kind of like a masseter on the inside of your jaw. It's not as strong, but that's what it does. So it helps to elevate your jaw and help you chew as well, and you use it in chewing. They say laterally deviate because it can. It can help you to pull your jaw back and forth, things like that. So I have to admit, if you found somebody really laterally deviated, where their jaw's on one side and it's not normally like that, then the medial pterygoid on that side of their jaw could be tight. It really could be. Miss Carrillo.
So like in the picture, it crosses, like the origin has the left sphenoid, and then on the right, it looks like the ramses of the mandible, so the right side of the bottom jaw. Is that what I'm seeing?
It doesn't cross from one side to another. It basically is inside. I know the picture is very hard to tell, but you've got one on each side inside, and they stay on those sides. Yeah. If I went back in my mouth like this, you can actually feel it inside your mouth, everybody. If you kind of go back here, you'll feel a really tight thing back there between kind of right behind your molars, kind of behind your wisdom teeth or whatever in that area. That's that muscle coming down. Not pleasant. Probably should have washed my hands too before I did that. But anyway, all right. I know. So many things. Okay. Mr. Singletary, yes, sir.
And why would have someone want that area massaged in there?
If, in my opinion, it's very rare. I always like to make sure there's good value for whatever I'm doing to a client. However much I'm exposing a client, and this is the type of exposing a client. But my main concern would be lateral deviation, which I can't really do really well, but it's when your jaw, that's lateral deviation.
Like when someone has a stroke in a way, and they're
Yes,
drop.
but if somebody had
Okay.
but if somebody had a stroke, rubbing this muscle wouldn't matter. That's when they lose control of stuff, right? But you're right, it looks that way. I'm talking about there's actual tension. Yeah. So, yeah, and actually I got it mixed up. If my jaw went to the left, it'd be my right medial pterygoid. It would be tight. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, by the way, I hope everybody remembers that every single thing I'm telling you is one possibility. It doesn't mean everybody with a laterally deviated jaw has a tight medial pterygoid, right? Be very careful about that. Yes. Sometimes we start being like, oh, Tapscott told me like cervical stuff feeds the arm. You got a pain in the arm. You must have a pinched nerve of the neck. No, you could. You might just have problems in your arm. Right. Okay. Mr. Richards.
So if someone's got problems like that and you don't want to enter their mouth, you could get them to do stretches instead to kind of untighten that muscle.
Yeah, I bet you could. I bet they could open their jaw gently and you could even stretch it the other way carefully. Yeah. I never thought about that. That's actually a really good idea. Yeah. Because I don't mind having people's fingers in my mouth, to be honest with you. That wasn't what bothered me when they did it. It's that the area is super tight and sensitive and it's just really weird and it's just really hard to work in there. Yeah. But yeah, I like your idea. Just kind of like the iliopsoas. Stretch it if you can't get to it really easily. Miss Clayton.
Yeah, we had a client used to come in and massage therapist would do this, and she'd put gloves on and massage their jaw because they had really bad TMJ, and the client claimed it helped. And then I had my jaw broken in 3.
Wait, you cut out there. You said you had your jaw broken.
To help someone who's had it. Yeah, I had my jaw broken in 3 places, both condyles and then condyle, and then in the front it just split apart.
Oh my God. Okay. Jeez. All right. So yes. So Miss Clayton would be prone to kind of, jaw problems and stuff. Miss Abelos.
So I learned facial reflexology, right? And one of the ways that they teach you to stretch that entire area is to pull up on the zygomatic arch, and I mean hard, like as hard as you can. And so pulling it back and up just like you would the occipital, and you put that there, and you can feel all of that tension release, but it's somebody coming from behind and pulling up, so you stretch that whole area. These 2 muscles, they lie underneath the zygomatic arch.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So they want you to get up under there and manipulate that and pull it up. Yeah. And you'll feel that pressure and that pain. And then you'll feel that release. And it goes all the way down that zygomatic arch.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good advice. Miss Clayton.
Sorry, just left up.
Leftover. I got you. Okay, I like leftovers. So that's the medial pterygoid. The lateral pterygoid can protract as well. And it is found essentially underneath the masseter. So it is right under the zygomatic arch here, right under the masseter. And so it can kind of be what we call telegraphed. Rubbing through the masseter can kind of get this one here too. So something that's really interesting about this is, so this guy hooks to the sphenoid bone as well. But what's really interesting about that is not that. What's interesting is that it inserts into what's called the articular disc and capsule of the temporal mandibular joint. And so back here, there is a joint capsule here. This is a, gosh, why am I drawing such a blank right now? This is a synovial joint. So sorry, everybody. This is a synovial joint, the most common joint in your body, a word that I've said 4,000 times. This is a synovial joint. It is covered by a joint capsule. And this muscle actually attaches to the bone and the joint capsule. And so if there is tension in this muscle, it can actually pull in the joint capsule and probably irritate this joint. By the way, what is this hole right here? Miss Carrillo?
External auditory meatus.
Yes, ma'am. How close is it to the temporal mandibular joint?
Miles away.
Yes.
Okay, that's like right there.
Yeah, I don't know what the distance is, but a couple of millimeters or something like that, half a centimeter or something. So you can see how tension can, people complain of ringing in their ears and things like that sometimes when they have TMJ syndrome. And that is your medial pterygoid. Yeah. Boom. And that's it. So let me stop sharing that. So today we learned about 4 muscles, right? We learned about the temporal muscle that comes down underneath the zygomatic arch. Most of it's up here, by the way. You can really rub this guy. It's all up here. Rub it, right? And ties into your gallia aponeurotica. So all this head tension, this is why people with TMJ, we actually don't just work this area. Just think about it. It's like our own personal lives, right? Our problems aren't always where we feel the pain. You know what I mean? So just because you have pain in your jaw doesn't mean it's not caused by shoulder tension. So we know with TMJ that shoulder tension plays in a lot. That shoulder ties into the mastoid process temporal bone, the tension in the gallia aponeurotica, all this stuff. So anyway, we learned today about the temporalis that's up here above the cheekbone, going underneath the cheekbone into the jaw. We learned about the masseter that is hooked to the cheekbone and goes down in the jaw. We learned about the lateral pterygoid that's right underneath the cheekbone right here. Right here, it's about the size of my thumb. Just a little thing right underneath the cheekbone, underneath the masseter too. And then we learned a muscle deep inside there, which is your medial pterygoid as well. So that's 4 muscles that have to do with chewing. And those are basically the only muscles that have to do with chewing, the act of closing your jaw properly, pulling it back in, pulling it out, all that kind of stuff. Yeah? So what are the 4 muscles we learned about today? Just what are their names? Mr. Richards? He knew I was going to call him. I don't know why. We had a moment there, I feel like.
So you've got the temporalis, the masseter, you've got the, how'd you say that word, pterygoids?
No, throw the P right out, just forget it was ever there. Pterygoid.
Pterygoids, lateral and medial.
Beautiful, thank you. Mr. Bose, what are the 4 muscles we learned today? Mr. Bose? You had your hand up?
Oh. I'm not talking. Sorry. The pterygoids, lateral and medial, the masseter, and the temporalis.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Singletary, what are the 4 muscles we learned today?
Oops, sorry, couldn't get my mute off.
All right.
The Masseter, the Temporalis, the medial pterygoids, and the lateral pterygoids.
I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Snell, what are the 4 muscles we learned today?
Those would be the temporalis, the pterygoids, lateral, medial, and the massetoid.
Masseter. Yep. Cool. Thank you. Mr. Manzanares, what are the 4 muscles we learned today?
Which ones?
The 4 muscles we learned today, what are they?
The 5 temporal bones or the muscles? Oh, the mandible?
No. Hold on. The 4 muscles. Everybody, like a couple of people said it right before you. What are the 4 muscles we learned today?
Zygomatic arch.
That's not a muscle. I think you're still.
Write that one down.
All right. So the temporalis,
Temporalis.
masseter,
Ambassador.
close. Masseter.
Masseter.
Yeah. Medial and lateral pterygoids.
And the medial and lateral
Pterygoids.
pterygoids.
Yes, sir. So we got the temporalis,
The temporalis.
masseter,
Masseter.
medial and lateral pterygoids.
Medial and lateral pterygoids.
Yes, we've got the temporalis,
Masseter. Medial and lateral pterygoids.
Yeah, good job, sir. Thank you. That's good. Thank you. Mr. Bosch, you still have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I was just wondering if you could quickly remind me about synergists and antagonists, because it was on the test last night, and I got the questions right, but I just really can't comprehend them, so does that make sense?
I really appreciate this question. I would love you guys to start doing this because we're kind of starting to wrap stuff up, right? This is a good time. And agonists, antagonists, synergists, and stabilizers are really important concepts to know, and you will hear them. You will hear them and stuff. So let me explain. So agonists are muscles that are doing the work. So I'm going to get this extremely heavy tape reel here, very heavy. And if I curl it to myself, the muscles contracting are agonists. I remember this because they're in agony. I'm working them. They're agonists, they're in agony. Who can tell me what 2 muscles, by the way, are curling this tape thing to me? Miss Carrillo.
Biceps brachii and
brachialis.
Yeah.
Brachialis.
I was like, what?
There is, by the way, Miss Carrillo, we haven't really learned about it yet, but we're going to. There is a muscle that comes from here down here, and it's called the brachioradialis, and believe it or not, it does actually help you with the flexion of the elbow.
I got confused.
Yeah. And believe it or not, all your forearm flexors that we're about to learn about that help you bend your wrist, they do go across here and they actually help you flex too. But the main ones, the main agonists, are the biceps brachii and the brachioradialis. Oh, shoot. The biceps brachii and the brachialis. Ah. All right. Hey, I want to make a big point here, though, for Mr. Bose and for everybody. If I flip my hand up here and I start to lift this thing up, no longer is it the biceps brachii. These are not the agonists anymore. They're not in agony. What's the agonist now when I start to lift this up like this? Mr. Richards.
Your tricep.
Oh, sorry.
She said it.
What?
Mr. Bose.
Yes.
Mr. Bose.
Triceps. Yes, your triceps are the agonist. Okay. So, now, then there's the antagonists, the anti-agonists, the antagonists, and they're just like when somebody antagonizes you. They're trying to stop you from doing what you want to do. They're antagonizing you. And the antagonist can stop me. So if, in massage, we usually care about antagonists more than agonists because we care about tight muscles stopping wanted movement. So Mr. Jones comes to me and he says, hey, Tapscott, I've been doing bicep curls and I actually, it's like I can't quite get, you know, any improvement here. I'm able to do 30 pounds. I'm sure it's a lot more, but he's able to do a 30-pound dumbbell here. And he's like, I can't get any more. And tomorrow I have a dumbbell competition and I need to be able to curl 35 pounds. And there's no way I can improve 5 pounds overnight. There's no amount of supplement, anything I can take to improve 5 pounds overnight. And I realized that his triceps are tight. So when he's been curling 30 pounds, his triceps and back have been fighting him. They've been antagonists. This isn't always true, by the way. This is just for this thing. This does happen with athletes. His triceps have been fighting him. So believe it or not, while he's doing 30-pound curls, his biceps have been doing 35-pound curls. They've been having to fight something pulling back. It'd be like me lifting this thing and something pulling down on my hand. So I loosened up his triceps, and he goes, I can all of a sudden curl 35 pounds. You're a genius. You made me stronger. I didn't make him stronger. I removed the weight that he shouldn't have been carrying around. And we do this with runners too, right? We look at like what's keeping you as you pull your leg back in your stride, which is what moves you forward. Maybe you have tight hip flexors. If you have tight hip flexors, when you go to pull your leg back, to swing your leg back to run, which is what you want it to do, you're fighting the muscles in front. So now part of my power is just going into fighting tight hip flexors. So we actually find for runners and jumpers that if we loosen up their hip flexors in front, which are antagonists in this movement, they're not always antagonists, but they are when you're running or jumping, their antagonists can stop the movement. Antagonists can stop the movement. If we loosen those up, they can actually run faster, run longer, jump higher. And you can actually see instant improvement in people's jump height if they're tight in those muscles. So we'd look at the hip flexors. We'd look at the iliopsoas. We'd look at the rectus femoris. We'd look at the anterior and even medial gluteals. We'd look at the tensor fasciae lata. We'd look at the sartorius. And those are the most fun things to work on, everybody, because when somebody has these problems, they get instant success. Instant success. And they really do, they walk away thinking they're stronger. So agonists do the work, right? And then if another muscle does the work, it changes. This is just a temporary name. Agonists are the ones doing the work. Antagonists are the ones that can stop the work. When a bodybuilder flexes for you, what they're doing is agonizing and antagonizing at the same time. I don't want my arm to come down here like this. I want to show it off to you guys. So I'm actually flexing my bicep and tricep at the same time. I'm actually impeding myself. But the thing is, we sometimes have clients come to us that are actually like that, where the other muscles are fighting them, like the muscles in their neck or their chest and their back, which is why Tapscott makes such a big deal about rhomboids arguing with serratus anterior and pec minor. Those are antagonist-agonist kind of relationships where they're fighting each other. And so you want to loosen up both sides. Now, that's agonists do the work. Agony. Antagonists could stop the work. Synergists help. And you can get really nitpicky about what's a synergist or not. Don't even worry about it. But let's actually use Miss Carrillo's example. Miss Carrillo actually talked about a muscle called the brachioradialis, which kind of comes down here. You can actually see it on most people. I don't think you can see it in my camera. I'm not developed enough, but you see this muscle kind of... That's the brachioradialis. And one of the things it crosses over this joint, one of the things it does is it helps me to do a flexion of my elbow. A flexion of my humeral ulnar joint. But it's probably not the main one. Now, you wouldn't be wrong for saying it's an agonist too. I would never mark you wrong. You're never going to have a test for me like that that's going to get that nitpicky. But you might argue that the biceps brachialis and the brachialis are the agonists, and this guy's a synergist. It's a helper. Not really doing the main work, but it's helping. Yeah? That's a synergist. It's a helper. And by the way, almost every move you do in the body doesn't just have one muscle, right? It's got about 13 muscles working. And somebody's doing the heavy lifting, and then you've got synergists. when you go to squat, like you got a bar on your back and you're squatting, your glutes, like your gluteus maximus and your hamstrings and your quads are the agonists. They're really helping get you, and the adductors. They're all helping to get you back up. But you've got other muscles kind of kicking in there as well that are kind of synergizing that movement and helping. And then while you're doing that movement, you've got stabilizers. Stabilizers do exactly what they say they're doing. They're working, and they keep me from falling over. So when I'm doing this squat, my stabilizers might be like my gluteus medius, kind of controlling my left to right action. My stabilizers might be my peroneals down in my legs, and my anterior tibialis controlling my foot stuff and stabilizing me. This is why personal trainers sometimes have you stand on a wobbly thing to do your stuff. They're building up your stabilizers. They're not your main movers, but as we found with a lot of movements, once your stabilizers are stronger, sometimes you appear stronger because you can control where the movement goes, right? You ever done something too heavy and you're like, that's your stabilizers. Once you get your stabilizers locked, you can push straight. And so stabilizers are important too. And again, they're not always stabilizers. They're stabilizers in a particular movement. They're stabilized movement. In fact, when I do a bicep curl, when I do a flexion of the elbow, hopefully what happens up here is my, why am I having such a hard time today? My rotator cuff muscles lock down to keep my arm from doing this. You don't want my arm. We take it so for granted I can't even do it on purpose. But honestly, if they didn't do that, you'd see me kind of like, I wouldn't be able to control it. I'd be able to curl my arm, but it would go all over the place. You lock down your shoulders before you do something with your hands. And those are stabilizers. Did that help, Mr. Bose?
Yes, it did.
Cool. So just remember the agony ones are working, the antagonist ones are stopping the work. They're antagonizing them. Synergists are working in synergy. This class has synergy. We work together. And stabilizers help to stabilize. They help to support and usually control direction, right? To make sure that that action is going in the direction you want it to. Yeah. All right. Any other questions before we release homework? You're so nice. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for asking. Really.
Release for today?
No. I don't think so.
I must have messed up then, because I didn't do 2 assignments, so those were probably due yesterday, huh?
Yes, sir. I hate to tell you, they were.
I think I can afford it. Yeah.
You snooze, you lose. Yeah.
I did that too.
Yeah. Oh well. I don't think they were huge assignments. If you have a good grade, you don't have anything to worry about. You have 2 assignments due tonight, though. Tomorrow by 8 a.m. They're not terribly long either. One is a 15-question test on the Masseter, the Temporalis, the Pterygoids. And another one is a 5-point test on the hyoid muscles. Tomorrow we are going to talk about the hyoid muscles. There are 7 to 8 hyoid muscles. There's 7 technically, but we're going to say there's 8, and you'll see why tomorrow. The hyoid muscles are these muscles, preview of coming attractions. They live here in your throat. They're called hyoids because they all insert or interact with the hyoid bone, that little bone here. And they usually hook in down into your sternum here, or up into your jaw here, or back in here. And they help control your tongue, your chewing, your swallowing, all sorts of stuff. But they all live in here. We are not going to end up memorizing the names for all 8 hyoids. It's not important, and you'll see why. But we are going to learn that they exist and how to kind of think about them. And they're divided up into groups and things like that. You've got ones above the hyoid bone, which are called the suprahyoids. Supra means above, Superman. And the ones below the hyoid bone, the infrahyoid bones. Hopefully those terms are familiar to you. Infra, below. Just like supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Yeah? So anyway, you've got 2 homework assignments released there.